So here's how God answered my prayer this week. I had sat at a picnic table at one of the area parks and prayed for my friend who has been deceased for a couple months now. She's the one who started the Between Heaven and Hell show with me. And I just asked God, I said, let me use her mission to help continue to bring people to Jesus so that her efforts aren't in vain. And I said, just tell her I said hi. And all of a sudden there's this woman who I've never met before by the name of Carrie. And she goes to the same church that my friend Tanya was going to at Landmark Baptist here in West Virginia. And she randomly sees me walking down the road. I was looking for the missing woman, and she said, do you want to go to Bible study with me? Aren't you the one that runs that channel? And I said, yeah, I'll go. Why not? So we go, and then they start reading from the Bible. Well, one of the verses they're reading is from the same verse I read this last Sunday, and the reason I do it is because of my friend Tanya, who inspired me to do this show from the Bible. And then my phone was dead, and I put it on the Bible, and then it turned back on. So I think that's not coincidence. That's from God right there. Alright, so I'm up here, and we went to Old Man Rivers, which is just right over here. I really like that company. We got food from the food pantry, and I help them very occasionally. I've done it once. I rode around with the owner on a Sunday, delivering to needy elderly. And when I take food, I like to give back. And so I told him, I said, make sure you let Bill know. I said, I'm going to be back to help on Sunday, most likely. And then I only had a 20, so the bus is here because I don't have a vehicle yet. They don't take 20s, so I had to go to this car dealership called Powell's Auto Repair right across the street. Those bags were just too heavy. I've done my fair share of carrying heavy bags, but I just couldn't do it. It was way too much. So I'll take the bus, hit a transfer, head back home. They gave us this really cool bag that keeps your stuff frozen and cold for 3 hours. The ice cream truck's out here, Mr. Softy. It's a Parkersburg tradition. It's kind of a West Virginia thing. Our neighbor actually ended up buying it for us, which was really nice of him. So hopefully we'll be able to help him out with some landscaping. Still progressing on the garden over here. A lot to do yet. Go in there and just be careful because it's like really intertwined with it. If you need me to, I can probably. Okay. Might just be down here, I'm not sure. So we're out here in the garden. We got Chaos Girl. She's got her poison ivy apparatus on, covering her arm because we got a little poison ivy in the bottom. So you can see how thick that is. And then we've got these are rotted.
If I'm picking it and I'm wiping my sweat off my face, I'm catching it.
True. We got these out here. These are our yellow straight neck squash. They are rotting. And I looked that up on another video. So the reason they're rotting is because they're not they're not pollinating. So the bees, the growth is so thick in here that the bees aren't finding their way to the blooms. Yeah, they're getting suffocated. So she removed the cage. You can see it's back here. And now the leaves are pushed out and you can actually see the blooms in there now. So now the bees can get in there and pollinate. We got these sunflowers up here. Flowers are actually kind of nice because they bring bees to your garden. And without bees and butterflies, insects that will pollinate, you don't eat.
That's what makes the world go round.
Yeah, insects. Just don't eat the insects like the Hollywood elites want you to.
Right.
But yeah, we got these pumpkins up here. They're really starting to branch out. Now you see this one over here? This will put out a runner. And when your vines start to put right about here, they'll put out a runner root. And wherever you let it go on the ground, that's where it's going to stick that root in. So I'm going to train it to go alongside the log there. That way we have a walking path. And that'll provide extra nourishment to the plant. You can have them growing up a trellis or a fence like that too. Yeah. And if your produce isn't too big, like if it's a gourd or a small pumpkin, then that's fine. It won't weigh it down. If it's a big jack-o'-lantern pumpkin or bigger, you don't want to do that. Now here's the produce she got right here.
That looks like a limp. Never mind.
So that's actually, yeah, it's pretty good size, I will
Perfect
say.
thing.
You can let your squash get a little bit bigger.
Yeah, I was just excited and want to eat it. So.
But if you let it get too
That
much
is
bigger,
good.
that's a pretty good size right there. You can actually eat out of that, yeah.
Yep.
And it'll have some seeds, but the seeds won't be like fully developed to replant yet. It's because you picked it young.
Yep.
So that's good. You can cook that up. And you can let them get a little bit bigger than that, but if you let them get too big, then you're going to get less produce on your squash plants. So you can see that there's plenty more coming on back here. And this is where you see the blooms. So you see that's a female bloom on the fruit right there. And since it hasn't opened up, they open up in the mornings. Your bees and your other insect pollinators need to go from a male flower, which will be this one right here on the end of your stem is a male. So they need to jump from that one and get to this one to pollinate it. And if it doesn't happen, that fruit will rot off just like you saw up there on the porch. But we've got plenty right here. This one here, the bloom has fallen off of it. That's a good one. It's gonna make it, it's not rotting. This one here still has it on it. It opened today. Let's hope it got pollinated. We do have broccoli over here. And this is looking pretty good. Look at that. That's really coming on. I mean, that's not far from being picked right there. This is all from seed. I mean, it's just doing fantastic. So we encourage you guys. It's not too late to still get out and plant. You're pushing it, especially by seed. We've got a little poison oak right down in here. Leaves of 5 or poison sumac. I said the wrong thing. Leaves of 5 or poison sumac. And then down in here, if you can see it, I don't know if you can. We've got poison ivy down there. Leaves of 3. I don't know if you can see that or not. But anyway, so we'll have to get in there. And she had her elbow sleeve on, so hopefully she doesn't get it. But garden looks good. We've got plenty of rows. I'm weeding down here. And you can see where all the weeds are coming up right in here. I'll have to jump in there. But we've got plenty of these rocks. And our neighbor, Melissa, came up with a really good point. And she said, well, why don't you do your Between Heaven and Hell, your Christian show, during one of your gardening videos? And I said, well, that's a really good idea. And her idea was to relate every stone as being an impurity in somebody's life. The sins that we have to deal with on a daily basis. And we just keep pulling the rocks out, but you'll never be perfect. There's always going to be rocks in your garden. And oftentimes we deal with that in our lives, imperfections. No matter how good we want to be, we always struggle, but we try to do the good things. We try to do right. And I looked up, just randomly, 2 Timothy here, where it says difficult times will come. But realize this, that in the last days, difficult times will come. For men will be lovers of self, lovers of money, boastful, arrogant, revilers, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, unloving, irreconcilable, malicious gossips, without self-control, brutal, haters of good, treacherous, reckless, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, holding to a form of godliness, although they have denied its power. Avoid such men as these. And we talked about that before. Get those people out of your life. If they're stuck and full on themselves, you can try to change them, but if they're not going to take it, avoid them. There's nothing wrong with that. The Bible literally tells you to get away from those people. They're holding you back. They're not doing you good. They're just going to bring bad into your life. Continuing on verse 6, for among them are those who enter into households and captivate weak women, weighed down with sins, led on by various impulses, always learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. Just as Jannes and Jambres opposed Moses, so these men also oppose the truth. Men of depraved mind, rejected in regard to the faith, but they will not make further progress, for their folly will be obvious to all, just as Jannes's and Jambres' folly was also. And it continues on verse 10. There was a party here that was pretty good. Actually, I'm going to start it on 12. Indeed, all who desire to live godly in Christ Jesus will be persecuted. But evil men and impostors will proceed from bad to worse, deceiving and being deceived. You, however, continue in the things you have learned and become convinced of, knowing from whom you have learned them, and that from childhood you have known the sacred writings, which are to give you the wisdom that leads to salvation through faith, which is in Christ Jesus. All Scripture is inspired by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, for training in righteousness, so that the man of God may be adequate, equipped for every good work. Now you really want to mound this dirt up, and you can go pretty high with it actually. Tomato plants, when you transplant them or as they grow larger, they'll actually put side roots out up the stalk. And you can almost even really go above these first leaves, because they're not true leaves, they're the seedling leaves when they first emerge. And even though they're not yellowing yet, you can really go right up to them, because they're going to fall off eventually anyway. And this will give the plant that chance to put those roots out and get extra nutrition as it grows larger. Now this is a mid-size fruit, Yellow Jubilee. I do believe it's a hybrid, which means that they just used different species they put them together to produce it when they created it down the road, I guess. It's not an heirloom. An heirloom is an original fruit from way back when. It's a true, tried and true, created from God's seed. And hybrid seeds, they're not necessarily the devil. They'll give you good fruit. It's not like it's a GMO necessarily, but they've been around for decades, long time. But anyway, we've got that all mounded up pretty nice. I like to push mine down pretty hard. The water will still get through because we have a clay-like soil here in West Virginia, and you can see it looks really good. I mean, that's the soil you want to work with. So what the cages are going to do, we're going to put a chicken wire cage on either side of this. We're not going to make these cylinders. And it allows us to go straight down as a very close row of tomato plants. Now again, this is Yellow Jubilee. It's a mid-sized fruit as a hybrid. And as such, they're indeterminate vines, which means they're going to be sprawlers. So by putting the the chicken wire on both sides, it'll be good support. So you see the width of the row already. That's where the cages are going to be. It's going to be a perfect fit for these plants. And going in here, like I said, it's a tall plant. You want to bury it right up to those leaves. This is really good soil. It's already been worked up once this spring, and now that it's the beginning of summer, it looks really good. We just had a rainy week. I haven't really seen any earthworms though, I will say that. And then aesthetically in your garden, you want it to not only be weed free, but you want it to be even. So you can see the ground is very even throughout. In this tray here, I filled in the bare spots where plants didn't come up with a yellow squash seed, and you can see that's come up right now. The stem has grown pretty tall. The conditions in the greenhouse were very moist and very warm, so they grew very quickly. That's only about a week from planting, so that's really good growth. And we're just going to continue this. We've got the fireflies have come out now. See if it lights up for you. I keep missing it. I'm trying to give you guys a firefly show here. It keeps going away from me. So here's an earthworm here. These are actually friends in your garden. If you chop one in half, it will still be alive. It'll just be two worms. You don't want to do it if you can help it though. I don't think that getting two worms like that is going to help things, but we had a pet turtle and they eat worms, but its name was Mikey, and we had to set it aside because it was not eating. So I couldn't find any worms for it, but yeah, it's a little late now. All right, so I'm out here weeding in the garden today, and one of the topics that we want to cover tonight is what do you have to weed out of your life as a Christian? So you know what the end game goal is. In the book of life, it's promised that if you just do the easy task of accepting and believing, that you will have everlasting life. It's written in the Bible that whosoever believeth in me shall not perish but have everlasting life. Every Christian knows that verse, but sometimes we want to help people, and sometimes you just can't do it. There's an old adage that if you don't succeed, try again. Well, sometimes if it doesn't work the first, the second, the third time with people, sometimes you have to move on and you have to weed them out of your life, like you're weeding the garden. And You know, sometimes that's what's best for you, because sometimes they're what's keeping you from better. They're what's keeping you from Jesus. They're what's keeping you from reaching a higher level, or that state of frequency, or whatever you want to call it. One of my other friends, I am going to call him out today, K.O. Phil. Very, very intellectual guy, very smart, and he was with me in the Army, and he believed against going like the pandemic stuff that they were rolling out. He was right on board with me. Well, one of his Army friends had him believing that there is no hell, and to me, believing in heaven and hell is really quintessential to being a Christian. I mean, to believe that, he says there's no hell because it's a fear tactic used to lower your vibrational frequency so you don't ascend higher on that plane. Well, for as long as you're in a physical state of being, I mean, you can only take your vibrational frequency so far. Now, yeah, you can use vibrational sounds and stuff, and that can help heal you, but what they're talking about, it doesn't really make sense, because, you know, if you're a Christian and you believe in the whole resurrection story of Jesus, he descended into hell before he rose again on the third day. I mean, there's all kinds of accounts in the Bible that suggest that hell is real. I mean, just open it up, and pretty much almost any book is going to tell you about how real it is. And yeah, I mean, it's fearful, because you know, if you don't believe in Jesus and you die, it's an eternity of that. And to me, if you subscribe to the ideology that hell's not real, I mean, think about it this way. There's a lot of good and there's a lot of evil on this planet. And yes, we are living in the tribulation. Our friend CP and me is what I've been calling them, Chris, Privet, and Muncie, Indiana, he says we're living in the times of tribulation. And he's absolutely right. And he often says that Christians are spared almost all of the wrath. So when you guys are sitting in fear, worrying about, I'm not going to have bread to eat next year, and that's why we're making our gardens and stuff, Jesus tells you, don't be fearful, for I am here. He's always going to be there with you. Now, it may not always work out the way you want, but as long as you trust and have faith in him, I mean, think about it. You've been alive this long, you've made it. You know, he's going to get you through. But there's good and evil everywhere, and we're seeing more and more of the evil coming out. Well, if there's got to be evil, obviously there's that oppositional force of good to contest it. So where do those demons go if there is no hell? They just sit here on earth and exist in another dimension? To each their own. I'm not going to knock anybody, because I can't prove anything one way or another, but it just makes sense to me. Got one of the dogs just got loose. All right, well, I'm going to see if I can get this dog put back, and we'll resume this video later.